Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense. Today, let's try to make sense of Mr. Murdaugh's testimony yesterday on cross-examination. Let's head on down to the beach and look. Okay, so the very first part of cross-examination was asking him if telling the truth about where he was on the night of the murders was important.
All right, sir.
You agree that the most important part of your testimony here today is explaining your lie for a year and a half that you were never down at those kennels at 8:44. Would you agree with that?
I think all of my testimony is important.
And you'll notice that instead of answering that question directly, what he said was, I think all of my testimony is important. Well, that's a tell. And it's a tell because clearly he does not want to focus on that, and he doesn't want to spend any time on it. He wants to move on to other things. But that's not the way cross-examination works. So in the next segment, let's listen to what the prosecutor says.
And would you also agree that the first time that law enforcement officers that you've talked to and the prosecution and here in open court ever heard you say that you lied about being in the kennels was today in this court?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
You would agree with that?
Yes, sir.
So again, he focuses on the fact that it wasn't until he got to the courtroom that he made this admission. And again, that is the kind of thing that resonates with a jury. And then in the next minute or two, he goes through things that they can agree on. For example, that he stole from his partners and his clients.
And you would agree with me that for years you were stealing money from clients
Yes, sir, I agree with that.
and that you were stealing from your law firm,
Yes, sir, I agree with that.
and that had been going on since at least 2010.
I'm not sure of the exact date, but it's been going on a long time. I'll agree with
All right,
that.
what's your best guess of the date?
I'm not sure. I have.
You don't know?
I don't take a dispute with 2010. I just don't know that for sure.
Then a little bit later, Mr. Waters, the prosecutor, sort of conversationally asks him about having had a badge when he worked for the solicitor's office, the same office that Waters works for now.
Did you get a badge when you became an assistant solicitor?
At some point, I did. Yes, sir.
And who gave you that badge?
My father.
Mr. Randolph?
Yes, sir.
And over the years, did you prosecute criminal cases, much as what's going on here today?
Yes, sir. At times, I did.
So we're going to move next to the segment about 14 minutes into the cross-examination where Mr. Murdaugh says that he had a long association with law enforcement through his work on the solicitor's office. Let's take a listen.
Did you or your family or your law firm ever have events or parties or social affairs in which the law enforcement community in this area was invited?
I mean, sure. The law firm itself didn't really sponsor things like that,
Right.
but there would be occasions where one of us in the law firm, and certainly we all had a lot of friends in law enforcement, and they were always invited.
Okay. And it's a simple point. You had a lot of friends in law enforcement, your family and you had a long association with the law enforcement community in this circuit. Is that correct?
Association being friendships and working relationships, absolutely.
So he had a long association with law enforcement. He got a badge through his dad when he worked with his dad at the solicitor's office. And he testifies to having done 5 trials with his dad. That is sort of important because he was at one point wearing the white hat, and now he's wearing the black one. And then in this segment, watch where they talk about the difference between the GPS and the telemetry. I think it's a very interesting conversation here.
You talked to the jury a lot about the GM data, but you're telling me that you're unaware that that GM initially responded to law enforcement's timely request and said they didn't have that, but then in the course of the trial, all of a sudden came up and said, you know what, we found something, and that's the reason why it arrived late. You're saying you don't know anything about that after talking to this jury about that?
I don't know a single thing about that. I know that y'all represented that to the court, and I don't have any reason to doubt it.
Good.
But I don't.
And you would agree that that's generally consistent with the telemetry data that the FBI did, correct? The OnStar data.
The OnStar, I think the OnStar data and the telemetry data are totally different.
All right, you don't think they're generally consistent with one another? Is that what you're telling this jury?
No, I'm not telling the jury anything about that. I'm just saying, do I think they're consistent? I think the OnStar data gives you one set of information, and the telemetry data gives you another set of information.
Okay. But you don't think they're consistent? I mean, you talked about it to this jury. I think we're struggling on what seems to be a fairly simple point. Don't you agree?
Mr. Waters, I'm just trying to answer your question.
All right.
And so I'm not trying to be difficult. My understanding of what you're referring to as the telemetry data is when a car goes into park and drive and that sort of thing. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
And the GPS information is telling you where a vehicle is on a certain path
Correct.
and what direction it's going. So I think that they're two different types of information.
The question was, were they consistent with one another?
I guess so. I don't think they contradict each other.
So what you'll notice is that he fights with him about the telemetry data and the GPS data. And basically what Waters is trying to get him to admit is that they're consistent with one another. And he clearly does not want to admit that because it, quite frankly, diminishes the value of what he put up in his case in chief. And that's not a good thing for him. So he tries to kind of run away from that, but at the end, Waters gets him to admit, yeah, they are more or less consistent. He doesn't think they contradict one another. So having made the earlier testimony about having worked for the solicitor's office and having had a badge and having left that alone, he has gotten Murdaugh sort of off track, talking about other things, and then he comes back to it with a photograph. And this is a particularly important exchange right here.
You testified some about the boat case, and we'll talk more about that later.
Boat case being, I'm sorry.
The boat wreck case. And we've talked a little bit about your badge. Did you have your badge with you on the night of the boat wreck?
On the night of the boat wreck, did I have it with me?
Yeah.
When?
Did you go to the hospital that night?
I did go to the hospital that night.
Did you have it with you then?
I don't know, but I don't believe so. But I really
You
don't
don't
know.
believe so?
But
When you went to the hospital on the night of the boat wreck, were you acting in any official capacity?
the night of when I went to the hospital, was I acting
Yeah.
in an official capacity?
Yes.
No, sir.
Okay. I'll show you what's been marked as States 569. And do you recognize the person on the right in that image?
No, sir.
You don't recognize that?
I don't recognize him.
No, I'm asking about that.
Oh, me?
Is that you?
Yeah, it looks like me.
All right. What's hanging out of your pocket in plain view?
Looks like a badge.
You didn't recall that until I just showed you that picture?
No, sir, I did not.
I think it's fairly obvious that he didn't realize that they had that photo.
Now, in this trial, he has claimed that he wasn't using that badge to get anything, but there's absolutely no reason why, when he wasn't working for the prosecutor's office, that he had a badge sticking out of his pocket when he's at the hospital where his son driving a boat while under the influence has been taken, and law enforcement is all over the place there. So that is important for a number of reasons, not the least of which that it shows that he's trying to curry favor with law enforcement. There is an undertone here that the prosecution is trying to get to, which is that, well, maybe because he was such good friends with the sheriff who was indicted, and that came in somewhat in the cross-examination too, maybe he was able to get some favors here that a regular guy wouldn't have gotten. I think that's important, and I think that the inferences that the jury can draw from that are going to be fairly powerful. So those are the first things that I wanted to break down and get out. I'm going to look at some additional testimony later on this evening and try to get another video out that details some of that testimony. As always, I am grateful for all of you who have signed and subscribed to the channel, and especially for your comments, telling me what you like, telling me what you don't like. I really appreciate that. Many times I can't necessarily do anything about the technical end of things because I am not necessarily a technical guru, but I do try, and I hope that the jump cuts and stuff that happen, and that's just because I live in a neighborhood where nobody has a blasted muffler. That's what I'd say. Nobody has a muffler on these big trucks that rumble back and forth, and it's very annoying and very distracting too. And then, of course, I kind of screwed up too because I spent about 30 minutes making content before I realized I had the ceiling fan on, and you could hear whomp, 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 whomp throughout the entirety of the video. One of these days, I ought to do a gag reel just sort of to show you all of my mistakes. I can assure you I would have you on the floor laughing if that was the case. Thank you again for watching. Have a marvelous day. I will catch you on here next time.
If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.